This is a Flying Cow production.
Well, hello and welcome back to the Great Film Challenge. I am Clay, the Flying Cow himself, and of course, here with me today is my nephew Aaron. Aaron, how we doing today, buddy?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm all right. I'm tired. I've been working with first graders all day,
Oh,
but
I don't like kids. I really don't like kids.
yeah, it's just because you were one.
I still don't like them.
All right. Well, real quick before we get started, I do just want to acknowledge something. Any listeners out there that pay attention to what we say in these things might notice that at the end of the last episode, we announced that our next episode would actually be Monty Python's The Life of Brian.
Yes.
However, we ran into some difficulties. We did watch it. Unfortunately, Aaron was not in the best mood
No, I was
at the
upset
time,
someone.
and so wasn't really able to focus on the movie. And so we decided to kind of put a little distance there. We will come back to The Life of Brian at
Yes.
some point. We just wanted to make sure that it got its due. So instead, we decided to spin the wheel, try something else, and what it landed on was In Bruges. In Bruges, for anyone that is not aware, came out in 2008. It was directed by Martin McDonagh, stars Colin Farrell, Brendan Gleeson, and Ray Fiennes. It is basically a black comedy drama crime thriller.
I loved it.
I was about to say, had you... Now, this was obviously one that you hadn't seen.
Yeah.
This was on your unseen list. Had you heard of this film at all?
No.
So when you spun it and you saw In Bruges, you had no concept whatsoever what it was.
Yeah, I had no idea.
Now, I gave you a brief synopsis of what it was, and I will give our podcast listeners the same synopsis. Basically, for anyone that is not familiar with In Bruges, it is basically it is a, as the description says, a black comedy, dark comedy about two hitmen,
Yeah.
who basically go on a job. The job goes wrong, and so they are told to basically wait.
Yeah.
And go to the Belgian town of Bruges for further instructions. And unbeknownst to both of them, one of them has a death sentence on his head. I mean that's honestly a pretty succinct way of setting up this film. So as I said, you had no concept of what it was going in. I was aware of this film. I had already seen it. I watched it a few years ago, actually, for a film challenge of my own.
Oh, cool.
It was suggested to me, and I watched it, and I just remember really liking this film.
I loved it.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot going on here. So you said you loved it. What are your just first thoughts? What was it about this film that you loved so much?
Probably one of my absolute favorite things about it was the soundtrack.
Okay.
That was amazing. I always love seeing using music in movies or anything. I think all of the actors were amazing, and the way in which the directors or the writers used the actors,
Right.
Because they're like Ray, I think, or
Colin Farrell's character is
Yeah.
Ray.
Ray's a weirdo,
Sure.
and he's legit kind of stupid at times.
Right.
But you didn't dislike him necessarily,
Right.
unless you were so stuck on one thing, and
Sure.
then you're stupid.
Well, I mean, I wouldn't go that far. I will say we talked a little bit about this. I will say I want to just mention the fact that Martin McDonagh, I mentioned it was directed by him. It was also written by him.
Yes.
Martin McDonagh is a playwright, and he does, honestly, these types of kind of dark, often, pointed types of stories. It's been a while since I've seen one of his plays, but I do think that there's often an element of humor, but it's often in a story that's so dark that you don't often think about the comedy.
Yeah.
Like, one of his plays that I'm the most familiar with is a show called The Pillow Man, which you talk about bleak. It's basically a show that takes place in like a dystopian, authoritarian future, and deals with mental illness.
Huh.
It's basically about two brothers, one of which may have committed heinous acts.
Dang.
But yeah, like I said, it's all about like mental illness and the way that it's really not being dealt with correctly. I mean, it's a really good show, but it's really dark. And that's like, I would say this is definitely much more of a comedy than that is. But it definitely feels right from Martin McDonagh. And honestly, when you look at, what this is, the fact that it was written by a playwright makes sense.
Yeah.
Because it's definitely, obviously there's the thriller and the action element to it, but it's basically, it's an action film as a character piece.
Yeah. I also really like the way he shot certain parts, especially the beginning. That was, well, to me, really just different.
Sure. Well, and this was his first film that he directed.
Oh.
So yeah, I mean, it was definitely, and often when you see things directed or written by playwrights, and again, like I said, you can feel the playwrightness coming out in him, but this is very much a movie.
Yeah.
Like, I wouldn't expect to see In Bruges on stage. Do I think that he could adapt it if he wanted to? Sure.
Yeah.
But there would definitely have to be some changes made.
Yeah. I'd like to see that. That'd be cool.
Sure. But one of the things that we talked about is, you mentioned, the acting in this film.
Yes.
In my opinion, the strength of this film is Brendan Gleeson's performance.
Well, you can't really say that he's not.
Huh?
You can't say that he's not, because Brendan Gleeson is Brendan Gleeson.
Well, yeah, I mean, you cast Brendan Gleeson, half your work is done. There's definitely a good point to be made there, but I think also just the character of Ken brings this whole thing together, because you mentioned Colin Farrell's character Ray.
Yeah.
And we mentioned as you guys were watching it, how kind of off-putting Ray is. He's intentionally, crass and
Yes.
offensive and things like that. And I told you off the pod that I feel like his character is almost like an experiment.
I can
Like,
I can kind of see it.
How unlikable can we make a character and still have you root for him to survive? Because
I like that.
Ray is the character in this who is basically marked for death. He made a mistake. He accidentally in the pursuit of his job, apparently his first job, killing someone, accidentally kills a child.
Yes.
Who just happened to be behind his mark. He didn't know. He didn't see. It was, as we say, completely an accident.
Yep.
And he is extremely remorseful about this.
Yeah.
To the point of, being suicidal.
Yes.
He actually tries to kill himself at one point.
At a playground, because
well, I mean, I will say there are no kids there when
after he waits at the least.
Yes. But
you can see why he does it, but
as we say, Brendan Gleeson's character of Ken is really the heart of this, because even though he is the established hitman, he's been doing this for Ray Fiennes' character Harry for who knows how long.
Yeah.
This has kind of just been his job, but he cares so much about Ray. And because Ken is so likable, that kind of rubs off on Ray, even though he does these really crass, kind of unlikable things. But you start to see him through Ken's eyes. He keeps calling him a kid. And he really is. He's very young.
He is very childish.
And so you can see, and he even, makes the point to Harry that he has the potential to be better.
Yeah.
And so when Harry tells Ken to kill him, he can't do it.
Yeah.
Because he knows that he has the potential to be better. This remorse kind of, shows that he can be a better person.
Yes.
But yeah, I mean, it's a great character study. And I mean, we don't get as much of him as we do the other two, but I think Ray Fiennes as Harry is also a really interesting character, because he's this very, on the surface, family man and all this kind of stuff, like tells Ken, that if he had killed a kid, he would have immediately, shot himself. Like he thinks that is, a line that you cannot cross even by accident.
Yep.
So he has his own kind of moral code. But he's also, a guy that hires hitmen.
Yeah. I'm not going to say I liked Harry as a character. I liked him as a bad person and the role he played. I mean,
he is, I have said before that there are certain characters that are less characters and more inciting incidents.
Yeah.
I will say Harry definitely is an inciting incident, but he also is an interesting character as well. Yeah. Because without Harry, you don't have the dilemma. You don't have the conflict.
He doesn't care.
Right. If Harry doesn't become what he becomes, then Ken just convinces Ray not to kill himself, and he goes off and fixes his life.
Yep.
But because Ray has the conviction that he does, and decides to come to Bruges to make sure that Ray dies, we get the whole rest of the film.
And I honestly love that second half with everything in it.
Oh yeah, I mean that's where the thriller element of it
Yes.
comes in, because before then it really is just a character piece, watching Ray continue to fuck up, watching Ken kind of enjoy this pleasant little community while Ray hates it utterly. What I think is so funny is that Harry sent them there to give Ray one last pleasant experience before he had to kill him, and Ray hates it. I will say that's on Harry for not knowing who Ray is. If he'd really known Ray, he would have sent him back home to Dublin just to have like one last like night on the town, before doing away with him. But instead, he sent him to Bruges, which he thinks is
makes
sense. in his words, a fucking fairy tale. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, I don't want to get a lot into details here. I mean, I don't think that this is one that we really have to delve into every moment.
Yeah.
Of, I mean, we did kind of give away what Ray's, what he actually did.
Yes.
Which is a bit of a surprise in the film, but I don't think that really takes anything away from watching the film. It's just it's a really good movie.
I loved it. It was amazing.
Like there are, it challenges concepts, and there are twists and there are turns, and there are really heartbreaking moments, but really well written moments.
Oh yeah.
Just what ends up happening to Ken, horrible, but at the same time, like, that's Ken,
Yeah.
So yeah, just really, really good movie. Is there anything else that you want to talk about this film?
Not that I can think of.
No? All right. Well, then, want to go ahead and let people know how they can get into contact with us. Of course, you can reach us on all the socials at The Flying Cow Pod. You can also email at theflyingcowpod@gmail.com. Make sure to let us know what you're thinking about what we're doing. Check out everything else that we've got going on the channel. Aaron.
Yes.
Normally this would be the time that I would tell you to spin the wheel, but you and I have already talked about this.
Yes.
We are calling an audible, and we have decided to I will say, because we pre-record this a little bit in advance, May got a little bit away from me.
Yeah.
I would have liked to do a little bit more in honor of May being AAPI month, Asian American Pacific Islander Heritage Month. But we do still have one release left in May.
Yes.
And so we have decided that this is the perfect time to honor the great Bruce Lee by watching the martial arts classic Enter the Dragon.
I'm excited. I love Lee, not only as a person, but as an actor. Like, he's just was amazing.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I will say I've seen a couple of Bruce Lee films, but I have not actually seen Enter the Dragon.
Yeah.
So I'm very interested to watch this, to check it out. Make sure that you check that out next time. But until that time, moo.